Rightio. I think now I've finally got it sussed. I think it's got a 10-second delay, so soon find out. Might be working now. Play. Alrighty. So it is working. So be quiet, you. Rightio. So PhD Phony, I think is his name, whatever name he goes by now. Made this video about a year ago. So last night I decided to make a response video to it, and the idea being I'm going to waffle on an awful lot because that way I can't get copyright strike if he changes his mind. But he did say I could go ahead and use it, so I do have his permission. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh, I've already got people in the chat. Awesome. G'day, fellas. The Ubercast and Lightning. Awesome. So yeah, I've never done a presentation before, so this is going to be a new one for me. But basically, last night I stayed up for quite late, made a video thinking I was recording it, and then when I went to stop it, I just realized I hadn't actually pressed record. So now I'm going to do it. So he's very hard to hear. I apologize for that. He's as quiet as a little dormouse.
Well, hello. It's been a very, very long time since I've made a video.
Barely hearing.
I think probably about 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years since I've made one.
See, lightning.
The reason I'm making this video is
nothing on the screen.
If you've seen any of the videos that I've ever posted, which
it's going now, mate. Should be.
Not a big fan of the flat Earth theory. Even less of
a
fan
him up as loud as I can.
The people that perpetuate this ridiculous theory. I love a good conspiracy, but it really needs to be bathed in some sort of fact, not just what these tools come up with. Anyway, I've followed a lot of people on YouTube, especially.
I'm just going to play it through from the start. Oh God,
guys like that who
scary, man.
You know, go out of their way. Creepy Blinders is another really good one. These guys go out of their way to expose these fools. People like Bob Knoll, Jaron, in particular, as an Australian, as you may have noticed, there's one guy in particular that I can't stand who unfortunately shares a country with me, and that's someone who you may have heard of before, Flat Earth Aussie Jesus. Now, he doesn't actually go by that name anymore. He's decided to change his name to Iron Horse.
Speak up, Tony.
Fuck me. I don't know what this guy's story is, but...
well, he could find out. Geez, I did a smashing job on this last night. I thought I had all the great comebacks because I was a touch inebriated, and I've got a bike looks a lot like that. It's actually called the Iron Horse too. How about that? Yeah, so I'm just doing this now to get it out because this guy makes a lot of claims that need to be addressed, and he waffles on a lot, and he's very difficult to hear because he doesn't know how to use a microphone or anything. We'll let him play for a bit and
I've had
see what he says.
Various dealings with him, I'd say probably over the last 12 months. I've made some comments in regards to his some of the videos that he's put up,
a lovely
where
fellow,
he claims these videos
PhD
are some
Phony.
sort of proof of a flat Earth, and
anybody
that's ever watched any of these videos would know full well that this guy is I don't know whether he's clinically insane, but
it's possible.
Very inebriated for most of his videos.
Sanity is overrated.
From what I can tell, is a very heavy drinker. Which is fine.
Not that heavy.
Shit whether he drinks or not, but when
kilos.
you add alcohol to an already ridiculous theory, it makes for some pretty fucking entertaining videos and diatribes that he likes to go on about and try and make us all believe. So just in the last couple of weeks, I was chatting, or I wasn't chatting, I was debating with him on his on one of his videos. The video was
Spit
him
it out.
standing on a beach somewhere. I don't know where he lives. I'm guessing it's somewhere in North Queensland, somewhere around there.
Oh, shows how much this guy does any sort of research whatsoever. He says he hasn't made a video for 4 or 5 years or something like that. So he goes ahead and makes one specifically and has no idea where I live, where I've made no, I have not hidden whatsoever where I've lived all this time. It's always, nearly all of my videos I've done of perspective stuff at the ocean have all been around Byron Bay, which is northern New South Wales. It's got nothing to do with North Queensland, which I've only ever been to once. So why the hell he even thinks that I'd be up from up there, I have no idea. But we'll try and let him waffle on. I do apologise again, he's so quiet, I can barely hear him myself. But
the northernmost part of the
easternmost part, mate. Easternmost of New South Wales.
And he's taking a video with his phone of a sunset.
And I also made no, what do I keep saying? I made no, I didn't hide the fact that I actually did that back in my old place where I grew up, where I moved to when I was a teenager, a place called Hawk's Nest, which is part of the Mile River system. So you got Tea Gardens and Hawk's Nest, the twin towns. Tea Gardens on the river side, Hawk's Nest on the ocean side. And as you go up the coast, you go into the Mile Lakes National Park, and there's a particular spot which I find very photogenic. There's a lot of sand hills and that, and you're looking out over the islands back in front of Hawk's Nest and Yakabar Headland. The Cabbage Tree Island actually takes on the form of a silhouette of a lady laying on her back. It's a very distinct sort of appearance. And it's a beautiful place to watch the moon coming up, which is basically the video he's chose to debate me on, as he's saying, was, I think it was called I Quickly Turned Around to See the Wild Dingoes or something like that. I'll have to double check that, find a link, maybe put that in the description later if I can remember to. But I thought it was a very interesting video because at that stage I was still developing the theory that the moon could well be a projection into our atmosphere. And so that's what I was filming live and discussing at the time. And it just happened to be the perfect setting, the perfect timing. And you will hear him show his misunderstanding at all of the flat Earth model, which, as I've been saying all along, is that the reason we have moon phases is because, like the hour hand of a clock, the sun is exactly the hour hand, the 24-hour clock, whereas the moon is similar, as though it's on another hour hand, but it's more like 24 hours and 50 minutes. So each day as it comes back around, it's going to be another 50 minutes behind the sun. And so this particular video that he discusses is obviously just a day or two prior to a full moon, as we'll see.
And then he spins around and there's the moon behind him. And I posed him the question because for anyone that is familiar with the flat Earth theory and the flat Earth model, that's in inverted commas because it's no model. It doesn't work anyway.
Come on.
And I said to him,
well, see, look at that. That's clearly ridiculous. You can't even see the elephants. There should be 4 elephants there. And the Earth is even flat. It's humped. So that's a really poor model, Tony. Poor.
In every model, every video that I've ever seen from a flat earther where they have
you would love Australia, mate. It is
presented their model. It's all generally the same. And what it is the sun and the moon revolving around the flat plane.
Here we go. This is what most people, when they first get presented a model of the flat Earth, that's what they will be shown. And that's fair enough because you've got to start somewhere. And I personally think that's a terrible false model for several reasons. Number one being, I think the firmament itself is only 70 miles high. So if you look at the scale of that and realize, I'm not sure if the mouse will actually show or not on the screen, but if we say worked out a circle where approximately where the equator is, that circle, you can probably see it on the lines there from that one to that one. That is a 25,000 mile circumference circle, so it would be 8,000 miles across, which in kilometers is 40,000 kilometers circumference, and so therefore would be, is it, I think it's only, I can't work out diameter in kilometers at the moment, was 8,000 miles, so it'd be around 10,000 kilometers possibly. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the fact is, you know, if we're talking that the firmament only being 100 kilometers high, then to scale, technically, the firmament would be as flat as a sheet of contact paper stuck to the surface of the map. At scale would be the true and accurate height of the firmament. So it's very hard to do a scale model, obviously. And so far as I'm concerned, this doesn't really represent our model at all. What this is, especially when it's done as a GIF, when they show them circling around and around, that would only work for a full moon anyway. So that's the one night where the sun and moon are diametrically opposite one another, which gives us the full moon. And then because the moon lags by an hour per day, after 2 weeks, it's caught up, or the sun has caught up to it. And that's our new moon phase. And then as the sun gets further away again, moon keeps coming back around. That's when we start getting our waxing moon. So yeah, obviously the model like this is a very simplified version of a full moon description. And it's not what I consider to be the model whatsoever. I believe the sun to be much higher than the actual firmament. And I believe the moon is actually inside the firmament, and it's diamagnetically opposed to the Earth, which is why it levitates, for want of a better word, and it only goes as far as it can because that's when it's stopped by a layer, what I call superfluid helium. So it's basically like floating on an ocean, an upside down ocean, an inverted one of superfluid helium gas. That's why it goes no further. And I think that that level can vary from time to time. It sort of fluctuates, and hence why we get a super moon when the moon is nearer to us, and so on and so forth. So for him to start saying that this is my model, that's never been my model, but it's a good place to start. For anybody that's new to flat Earth, you don't know, you know, you got to start somewhere. You got to learn to crawl before you can walk, and walk before you can run. Well, you're not going to take off with a whole new, complete new understanding of existence itself without learning some basics just to unbrainwash to begin with. So that's why I don't mind seeing people use models like this just to help get started on what flat Earth could possibly be. But,
diametrically opposite to each other. Now,
yes.
That's all good and well, but it obviously doesn't work in theory, or in reality, I should say, because if you've got the sun, as you will have seen in other videos or other anti-flat Earth videos, the sun doesn't project the light across the plane and then just stop at exactly halfway across the Earth.
So this is where he gets me lost. For 1 minute, we're talking about the sun. Then we're talking about the moon. Then he jumps back to the sun again. He's all over the shop. So for me, this is a good example, actually. And damn, I did this well last night. I'm so regretting that I didn't record it. But what I'd used was this little thing here. This is a little piece of fluorite that I bought many, many years ago. It's made in the shape of a star tetrahedron. Well, actually, that's just a tetrahedron. A star tetrahedron is where both the pyramids are extended through each other a little bit, so it's more star-shaped. And I believe that the star tetrahedron is actually an extremely important shape. But the tetrahedron is good enough for the purposes of this because, as you see, each side is like a facet. And I believe that our skylight, firmament, may actually be an energetic star tetrahedron. So the way that light gets refracted, so the sun might be somewhere completely different, hitting there, but shining out through here. And that will create these distinct shapes of light, just as you see there. So it can create very straight lines. I've got another image somewhere, actually, it'll take me forever to find, so I won't worry about it, but where it actually shows that a distinct quarter of the azimuthal equidistant map is in nighttime when 3/4 of it is in daylight, as we would imagine during the summer solstice in the southern hemisphere, which we're less than a month away from now. It'll be coming up on December 22nd. In places like Ushuaia, for example, get about 17 hours of daylight. So 3/4 of the world can be lit at once if we understand the model and the way that light can be projected, and it can create what I would call distinct quarters, just like a pyramid, where the light can indeed be projected, which is a true form of refraction, refracted light, as opposed to what the globe is used to explain why curvature can't be seen. And so, yeah, as a Lucy in the sky of diamonds, Lucy being Lucifer, the light bearer in the sky, which is diamonds. It's not talking about the stars, that reference, I believe. It's talking about something very similar to this. And in fact, I don't know if I can, there it is. I just got this one in the mail the other day. I haven't even opened it yet, but I thought it might be interesting to have a look at. Probably need a little light to shine on it. But it is an actual, just a glass cut diamond. And as you can see, various facets in that. If the skylight was something like a jewel, where we get the name jewelry, or made by people that cut precious stones and that, there could be something about our model and lights and the reason why the stars appear to rotate opposite directions in the southern hemisphere to do with the way facets work. So everything in the middle is pretty much like the flat part of the dome. So you can hold it up a bit closer there. And then everything else is a facet. So when we're looking out at nighttime, we're looking at a facet of the sky. So that's why they talk about the four corners of the earth. When we look south, we see the Southern Cross and everything rotating around Sigma Octantis, the opposite way from how it rotates around Polaris in the north. But then by the time it becomes night, say over South Africa, the entire facet has turned. So they're looking a completely different south from ours because it's 90 degrees the other way, but they're still seeing the same facet. And as it all rotates around, that's why everywhere sees the same stars in the south, but in the north, you're actually looking up in the true center of it, where everything rotates around Polaris. So I thought glad he brought that up.
There's never been a decent answer as to how they reckon that works. You know, they've all tried to explain it and they go, oh, it's this and that, but there's never been a definitive answer to that question. So the question that I posed to him was, if the sun is, according to them, going around in a circle, and a sunset is not actually the sun disappearing down underneath the earth or underneath your viewpoint of the earth, it is the sun moving away from your viewpoint to an extent where it no longer casts light, and that's your sunset. And
yeah, correct. That's absolutely correct, 100%. Everything that gets further away in the distance appears to get lower and lower. And the best example I use when it comes to perspective is to just use any old room or hallway, and you can see it for yourself. The floor appears to ramp up. And if you followed that line as far as you could see, like this picture here, looking to horizon, it will rise to horizontal to your eyes every time. That's how perspective works. Meanwhile, the ceiling is ramping down. So again, if you projected both those lines infinitely out, they will meet at a point called the convergence point, which is at the horizon, horizontal to the eyes. And the higher it is, the more steeper it will appear. And so you can test that in your room simply by sitting down on the floor and having another look. Now the line of the ceiling will appear a lot steeper and the floor will seem a lot more flat and smooth. And then the converse happens if you stood up on your chair and looked. Now the ceiling looks a lot flatter and the floor seems to ramp up a lot steeper. So they will always both meet at eye level. And when you're outdoors, obviously it's all open air. There's no ceiling apart from the clouds and the sky itself. And that is why they will still converge at the same point, same convergence point at the horizon, horizontal to the eyes. So the sun is always inevitably going to vanish no matter how high you got. Although technically, if you got up as high as the moon, you could probably see the whole time. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen weather balloon, helium balloon footage where the sun is completely not able to be seen at all. So you might not necessarily have to even go all that high, about 25 miles, and you will permanently be able to see the sun. And similarly, why sometimes if you're in an aeroplane, because the horizon is now 30,000, 40,000 feet beneath you, technically, even though it is ramping up to eye level, there's still nothing there in all that point. So sure enough, the horizon is dropped by your amount of elevation, but then if you're above the clouds, then they are still technically your ground ramping upwards. And that is why you'll see the sun sometimes through the clouds if there's enough gaps, giving the illusion that the sun could possibly be in the clouds, but it's clearly not. It's just that far away. That's just what you're seeing. And so, yeah, you're always going to have the convergence effect. You can't avoid it wherever you go, but your height determines how far the convergence point is. So basically, because we live on the earth, on the ground, if we're at sea level, 6 foot high, it's going to be 3 miles away, 5 kilometers from 180 centimeters. Got to do both. Got to remember to be metric because I'm Australian. He'll have a go at me for that shortly soon too. So yes, I can do both, Tony. I just prefer miles because it's easy. So yeah, our horizon is generally not that far away. Here, I believe I can see maybe 30 or 40 miles to the distant mountains because there's nothing in between getting in the way. So the diminution of everything getting smaller and smaller in the distance means that the things nearer are always going to block it. So you're always going to have a pretty nearby horizon unless you get above the things in the way and you can see further and further. That's works beautifully for a flat Earth. How that works on a globe where everything's actually already gone beneath a curve, you should technically have to go forwards and over the curve to see what's on the other side of it, not up, which is actually backwards, away from what's over the curve. So I think that's ranted enough. I can continue.
They like to throw the word perspective into it, where they think that the only reason why it looks like it goes down beneath the Earth or below the horizon line is due to perspective.
Yeah, exactly. As I just explained. In fact, this is very interesting that he should even produce this image because you get globers talking all the time, well, how come the sun doesn't shrink in size? Well, look at it. You can actually see very quite clearly there that the sun actually is getting slightly smaller. I did actually make a note of something. Where was it? All right. Exit full screen. Made a note of a comment I made the other day, why the sun doesn't shrink in size. We can just quickly open that up and read it. It's basically a factor of proportions. So as you've probably seen, he doesn't have it on that one, but when you see, say, street light poles moving down the road, you'll see that there's the one nearest to you looks massive. It goes right out of screen at the top of the image. The next one, you can see the entire post. The next one, it's like two-thirds of the size. And the next one, they gradually get smaller and smaller until they disappear into the distance. So it's about proportions and the factor of how many times further away it is from where you're viewing. So my comment says it's basically a factor of proportions. The nearer something is, the more it diminishes in size in proportion with doubling the distance away. The second pole is double the distance away as the first, as you'll see the greatest proportion of shrinkage in that distance. But by the time you see the 10th pole, for example, the distance between it and the 11th is tiny, so the difference in size appearance of the 10th to 11th is barely noticeable. In the case with the sun, even when it's nearest, it's already a long way away. And because it's a light source, you'd really have to compare the street lights at night and see if there's a noticeable size difference between the 10th and 11th lights, and then imagine them to be 100 times further away. And that was being generous. 100 times further is probably still, what are they, if they're 30 meters apart, you're saying 10th or 11th, so they're only 300 or 400 meters away, if you're lucky. So 300 or 400 kilometers. Yeah, okay, 100 times further away. Then you have to factor in that the horizon, your visual convergence point, is barely more than a mile or so away. with 0 obstructions across flat level water. It's about 3 miles or 5 kilometres. It's at that distance that the sun becomes obscured bottom first. So even though it's much further away than at midday, the proportion of distance it's travelled as compared to the distance it already is insignificant to show any amount of diminution. However, if you get to a very high place without obstructions, it's possible to see it shrink into a tiny dot where it just seems to linger on the horizon for a long time until eventually the atmosphere becomes too great for the light to pass through. You can test all these things for yourself. Many pilots have gone so far as to claim that the sun has set when they're at 40,000 feet, yet if you look really closely, you can still see a tiny speck. Pointing this out to the pilot, however, might get you blocked for life. They have very fragile egos and hate to be shown they're wrong. And that is a reference to the guy, I call him Wolfie 1080, but I think he goes by Wolfie 6020, and he's a dirty dog liar, and he knows it. He had a video some time ago. Where's my StreamYard? There it is. Did a video years ago where he's at 40,000 or 42,000 feet, and he's a big man of his cameras and all that sort of stuff, and he's filming what he says is the sunset, and he's describing it and saying, as you can see, the sun has set. And then I pointed out, actually, if you look closely, you can still see the sun. He blocked me because of that comment. So, yeah, and he's blocked me ever since. That's going back, many years. He just doesn't like truthers, especially a fellow Aussie truther who points out the lies of his bullshit. So that sunset is exactly, all those images is exactly what we'd expect on the flat Earth. So just got a couple of comments there. Sea lightning 300. Why does Sydney sunrise begin at 1:17 southeast and sunsets at 2:40 degrees in southwest? Tropical Capricorn is in Sydney north sky. The sun should be in the northern sky. Makes no sense. Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm talking about the star tetrahedron skylight, the 2 inverted pyramids. The light is actually getting refracted through them. And so it's actually spreading out far more light than what we would naturally expect from a spotlight sun. It's not a spotlight. It's a complex sort of thing. It'll require an entire video by the time I finally figure out exactly the model, how it works, and actually make a glass star tetrahedron and shine some lights into it in a dark room, and you'll see the patterns that come out. The sun will always appear in a much different spot from where it actually is. In fact, my very first whiteboard lessons video, I talk about why the sun isn't where you think it is. It's everywhere at once, but nowhere in particular. It's the illusion. That's why as you move, as you walk around, for example, the sun seems to move with you, as does the moon. They're not in a particular location. I'll probably get to that shortly.
Which also is complete nonsense. But anyway, getting back to their theory, so they say that that's what happened. So I posed this to him, and I said, so if that's what's going on, and that the sun has then moved away, and at this stage it was right on sunset, so there was still a lot of light in the sky, and just basically the outer limb of the sun going down. That's right. He's talking about my video. That's right. I should have tried to find a download of that actually. Bring it in, but anyway, maybe next time. As I say, it's the first time I've ever done a commentary on another video, so I'm pretty amateur at doing this sort of stuff. I'm surprised I got this far. So he's talking about my video, and if I can just set the scene for you, I'm on top of these sand hills, and it's a very long way to the Great Dividing Range on Australia's eastern coast. It's a huge mountain range inland. Usually a minimum of 100 kilometres or so inland. I think it's generally a couple of 100 kilometres. It was called the Great Dividing Range because when they settled in Sydney, it took them many, many years before they actually got across it and found the Bathurst Plains on the other side of the Blue Mountains, which is where I was born. So you've got a really good, long, unobstructed view because on the east side it's all ocean. Where the moon was rising, a beautiful, almost full moon, has well and truly risen as the sun was setting, looking somewhat like the image he's got there, but it was over the mountains. So, which is interesting because when it reaches the mountains, you think, okay, it's going to be gone in a matter of moments, but no, because it's just moving away, it can take ages and ages and ages before that last little speck of light finally disappears.
which could only happen on a flat Earth.
Below the horizon. But I said,
Speak
there's
up,
a
then.
turnaround and there's the moon already. So the moon has already risen, so to speak.
Nice studio shot. Yeah,
How can that
it was a
possibly,
bit bigger than that.
how can that be?
How can it be?
And if the sun hasn't set, then how can we possibly, theoretically, the moon's supposed to be on the other side of the Earth. So how can we see the moon? And what I also asked him was, how come we see the moon at different times? So sometimes you see the moon and the sun, or you say the sun's out and you can see the moon traveling through the sky during the day. Other times you only see it for a very short amount of time at night, and it's on a different ecliptic. So,
Well, as I explained already, we have phases. We don't reinvent the wheel just because we know the Earth is flat. We have phases. The phases are damn obvious, and obviously the moon wasn't quite full. When it is full, which I actually videoed a couple of, I think it was the next evening or the evening after. It was one or the other. When the full moon rises, it will rise precisely at the moment of sunset. But you have to bear in mind that because it's 50-minute difference between the sun and the moon each day, some even say 49 minutes, because there's that difference each day and it's a 24-hour clock, then you're not going to be in exactly the right place where it will rise exactly at sunset every time there's a full moon. It's different every month. So it can be anywhere within the hour. So sometimes your full moon isn't precisely full because the moon is only precisely full for a split second. And that's the time when it will rise exactly at sunset. But the rest of the time it can be anywhere within the hour where it more or less rises at sunset. So the fact that he's incredulous that I was able to film the moon because he thinks our model says that they have to be diametrically opposite each other all the time has never been what I've said in our model whatsoever.
He was sort of saying, oh, well, that's, this is all explained in the theory. I said, okay, so explain it to me. But you're going to need to explain it to me like I'm 5, because what I know of the sun and how things happen in reality is that the sun and the moon are not working the same way. The sun is not revolving around the Earth, and the moon is.
Well, there you go. That's where you're wrong, because that's why I use the analogy of the clock hands, where the face of the Earth is the clock face, the sun is the hour hand, and it's basically will always be moving, no matter where you are on the tip of the, or wherever you are on that hour hand. Like if the sun was sliding in and out along it, it's still always going to be going 15 degrees per hour. So whether it's over the Tropic of Cancer, over the equator on the equinoxes, or over the Tropic of Capricorn for the summer solstice that we're going to have later this month, it's still going to be moving 15 degrees per hour. The speed of the hour hand never changes despite the size of the circuit taking changes. So again, that's the sun. The moon being another hour hand, being a 25 or 24-hour, 50-minute hour hand, explains why it's not always going to be diametrically opposite the sun, and why we have the new moon phase, and sometimes the moon comes so perfectly aligned with the sun that it eclipses it. And so we get the solar eclipse, the new moon, because we can't see the new moon. And since this is obviously a discussion about the moon, I may as well explain that now as well, is that the light we see from the moon is that which bounces from the sun, hits the moon, reflects down into what I've called firmament B. And I'm not sure if he brought that up when I was getting a drink out. Put a lid on the esky. I'm not sure if he even mentioned it then, but he brings it up again later, so I'll most definitely mention firmament B. But what I say firmament B is, and he does actually have some good images here which help me do this very well, is the atmosphere. It's the gaseous layer that reaches up about 12 to 14 miles, so roughly 18 to 20 kilometers. That's the maximum height of the atmosphere where we have blue sky. And the gases are ionized, which basically electrostimulates them to cause them to glow. No different from gases inside a fluorescent light bulb. When you add a power source to them, they fluoresce, they glow, they give off light. That's what daylight is. So when you open up a curtain, you've got no direct sunlight coming in, but the whole room lights up. That's daylight glow. That's why the sky is blue. It's dominated by the noble gas argon, which makes it blue. And then the twilight edges, the argon ceases to glow, and then you have the soft glow of the neons, which requires less energy to glow, which is why neon lighting is such a popular thing, especially at night time, because it glows and looks pretty. So the neon is the twilight, so that's why daylight is fringed by twilight once the sun is no longer in the visible spectrum. That explains your twilight. So for the moon then, and the phases, and why when it's diametrically opposite, the sun is fully lighting that side, it reflects that fully lit side down into what I call firmament B, the gaseous layer. And there it creates a holographic plasma projection of itself, of everything that is lit by the sun. It's sending solar radiant energy directly towards the viewer. So you see it in your line of sight to the moon, showing an exact replica of the moon. So when the moon's fully lighting it, there are no shadows in any of the craters because they're all fully face on. When it's a partial moon and there's a terminator line down some part of it, right along that line in particular, those craters will be a lot of them in shadow. So what gets projected then creates a holographic plasma projection of the moon. But what isn't projected, because it's in the dark, doesn't get projected at all. So it seems as though that part of the moon is invisible. And for all intents and purposes, the moon we're seeing is a flat disk. It's a holographic plasma projection of a flat disk in the firmament. And if something should break through the firmament, like we send a rocket up, for example, it will, like when you drop a pebble into a pond, create ripples through that layer. And that's what creates the lunar wave that people like Crow 777 have filmed quite successfully. It's become a bit of a mystery to some people. As far as I'm concerned, with that theory of the moon, that is why we get a lunar wave. In fact, it's the lunar wave that inspired me to even think that could possibly be how we are seeing our moon. So we're seeing the moon at just 12 to 14 miles away. So it's much, much closer than we think when we're looking at it, which is why we can zoom into it with such clarity, see details on it, that photographers bemoan the fact you cannot see nearly that great a clarity of things in the distance. Say, looking at a distant billboard 20 miles away, you can't get anywhere near that clarity. And yet you can get something from the moon 250,000 miles away. It's obviously much, much closer. And that's the secret to it. So the actual moon floating on the superfluid helium at about 70 miles high, 100 kilometers, is about the same height as the sun. It's breaking through the firmament where it creates the bright orb of plasma by fully hitting the hydrogen, which causes it to boom, but then the helium surrounding it stops it from going kaboom like a hydrogen bomb. So it's actually insulated by the helium, and that is why modern science tells us that the sun is fusing hydrogen into helium, because in a sense it's what's going on. It's a chemical reaction happening way up at the firmament height. The helium is basically saving us. It's the savior in the. So yeah, maybe that's why Helios is a good name for him after all. Let's just keep him going for a bit while I can gather my thoughts.
And that's why you see the moon at different times and you see the sun at the same time every day. And as it goes through the seasons, it fits in with the season. So,
well, that's right. Yeah, it does fit in with the seasons. That's what creates the seasons. When you see the sun for extended periods of time, I'm spitting on my keyboard now. When you see the sun for extended periods of time, that's your summer season. When you see it for less and less, that's your winter season. And the way that works on the flat Earth model is the sun being perhaps 3,000 miles high above this firmament, which I believe is frozen ice. So I can even think of it as frosted glass, because it's just like frosted glass. It's just like ice on top of a frozen lake from a fish's perspective. Is that as the sun gets higher and higher, the circuit it makes around the equator seems to get smaller and smaller. So that's why when it casts directly down into the firmament, it makes the smaller circuit, the Tropic of Cancer. As it reaches June 22nd and starts spiraling back down again more and more, when it hits the equator, that's the equinox, that's September 22nd, it makes the circle, especially around the equator, the equal distant point between the two tropics. As it gets lower and lower again, it creates an even bigger circuit, just exactly as you'd expect if you look down a tunnel. The far end looks smaller, the near end looks bigger. That's the same sort of thing, but this tunnel is high above us, the path of the sun spiraling around, and it's a 25,000 mile or 40,000 kilometer path that makes every day around the equator, or technically it's actually around the Tropic of Capricorn when it's nearest. That is its actual true path. So it's actually sort of like a volcano shaped in a way, is that that's its actual path when it's nearest, and then it just gets smaller and smaller as it gets further and back down again, so bigger and smaller. So that's what creates the season. So the direct sunlight, when it's then on the inside of the equator, inside of the equinox, making the smaller circuit, gives more direct light into the center and longer daylight hours, and hence they have their summer season. Then when it gets lower down, the indirect light has to cross across the equator into the north, so they get shorter length days and they get their winter, while we, meanwhile, get this stinking hot summer. And as I say, if it's some sort of star tetrahedron skylight that is actually spreading the light around, that's why it can distribute when it's at its lowest point over 3/4 of the surface of the Earth at a time. So when he shows the seasons like this, and this is actually quite hilarious because he has a go at me about my abilities to talk about, talking things in miles, whereas in Australia we talk in kilometres. And here he goes showing winter, and it's December 21, 22. And it's actually, no, that's our summer, mate. So you can't even get your seasons right. How un-Australian of you.
So in summer, you have the sun higher in the sky, and winter, you have the sun lower in the sky. So I'm just going to give you, I don't know whether this comment is still up on his
I don't delete comments.
I wouldn't be surprised if it gets deleted, because he's deleted millions of comments before. But this is a typical flat earther. So as soon as they get backed into a corner, they either block you or they try and compete with word salad. That's what
I'm not a glober.
So I don't know whether he's blocked me. I don't think he's actually blocked me, but I don't know whether he's deleted comments. I haven't bothered.
So I should have drink first and paused. I love how he's put this one out. Damn, I wish I remember what I said last night about this, because I was quite inspired. But this is very typical of the average glober, is to use catchphrases such as word salad. Now, I've noticed this a lot on the Facebook discussion groups. If I say anything, I have one of those, I'm a writer, and I sometimes have that thing where I have a flowing thought. So when I start with a thing, I have to put in this bit and this bit and this bit and this bit before I can reach the conclusion. And as far as I'm concerned, it's all one sentence, but a lot of people call that a running sentence, even though it all makes sense. And all they've got as a response to that then is word salad, whereas they just don't have the brain capacity to follow a thought all the way through when you've got multiple steps you've got to take to reach the conclusion. So they love to say word salad.
Let's go back and have a look. But I did screenshot the comments just in case.
And basically, this is actually having a go at him. He doesn't even realise that he's having a go at himself, because when you use the term word salad, it's when you have no fucking clue what they are talking about. And so you go, oh, that's going to make me think. Word salad, TLDR.
This took me a full week to get this answer. It's not a good answer.
Live for comments,
to say the least. It is pretty much absolute nonsense. From my point of view, from his point of view.
Because you're the PhD.
But when I said the term word salad, you'll see what I mean with this comment. So here's the comment that he made. This is in response to my question, and this was the one that it took me a.
So I don't see a problem. So it's obviously responding to somebody called Just a Globe, which that's annoying, because I also like to read the comment that I see what I'm responding to before I even know exactly what I'm talking about first, because it's obviously a response, because it said also. You wouldn't start with also unless you're responding to something. And so he's left out what I'm responding to in the first place, which, that's very ingenious of people who cherry pick quotes. But what do I say? Your diametrically opposite opinion is when simplified GIF used to show the model as it occurs only on the full moon night. Well, that's exactly what I've said. That's all it is. So if you're just using a simple GIF to highlight our model, you'll never have it properly. You need something that's going to show 365.25 rotations of the sun just to show 1 year. And so when we're talking about the Earth, our reality, this is a big topic, man. It's not just something that you pluck out of thin air talking about a model of a car or any sort of other sort of model. We're talking about reality itself, existence, the Earth we live upon. It's a huge, huge topic. And so it requires a lot of shit to talk about, man. And so you can't just show a simple model. The girls always want to say, oh, show me your model. It's like, well, it's fucking reality, dude. Step outside and look at it. That's our model. It happens at full scale. When you're trying to represent a model of something that's everything into a model, it's just never, ever, ever going to work. The greatest model maker in the world couldn't even hope to come close to modeling reality of the Earth and the universe into a single model. You just go outside and look at it, man. Appreciate it for what it is. It's huge. It's awesome. There we go again. I'm talking about them as similar to hands on a 24-hour clock. The sun is consistently 24 hours every day. The moon is a bit slower, about 50 minutes a day slower. Full moon rises diametrically opposite the sun, projecting its entire sunlit side all the way down into firmament B, the gaseous layer of various noble gases which fluoresce under solar energy. The moon projects a unique energy from the sun, which creates a plasma holographic projection of itself in firmament B. So I don't really see how that's word salad. I don't see how it's hard to understand. Maybe it takes a few times of hearing it to understand the model, to know what it looks like. So we'll get into it because he helps me out.
So first part of his comment there, thinking of it as a 24-hour clock, I'm not sure why you need to do that, but
not sure why we need to use a 24-hour clock, because the sun is the 24-hour clock hand, our hand of a 24-hour clock. Why wouldn't you think of it like that? That at least is a huge part of the model that you're always demanding. So to not even use it, why wouldn't I? Are you insane, man? You want a model and I give you a model and you can't understand why I would give you a model that is what we see. Ugh, this guy is thicker than 2 bricks. Stuck together.
The next bit here,
and water and other shit.
The moon is a bit slower, about 50 minutes a day slower.
Yeah.
Okay, so the full moon rises diametrically opposite the sun, projecting its entire sunlit side all the way down until firmament B, into firmament B.
Yeah.
So firmament B being something that he's made up in his head, because
no, it's observations.
There is no such thing.
Well, I go and describe it.
Various noble gases.
That's what I'm talking about. Firmament B is the gaseous layer of various noble gases which fluoresce under solar energy.
That's called the atmosphere, champ.
Yes, yes, very good. Woohoo!
So
we have a
meeting
of minds.
Flat earthers like to do. They like to.
Yeah, look at that, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Where it goes from blue into black, out of the blue and into the black. They give you this, and you pay for that. That's the firmament B. That's why I call it. It's not a firm firmament. It's a gaseous layer. And as you can see in this image, actually, which I think is quite telling, is the moon appears within the firmament B. It's beneath it. That's the layer. That's the density layer where it's particularly stimulating the xenon and krypton gases. Xenon is actually, I think, a byproduct of krypton. It's like its little brother or something. That's why under a full moonlight, you can actually, if you have a book, you can read under full moonlight, but if you have a picture there and it's a color image, you'll only see in black and white, because the krypton and xenon colors only stimulate in a sort of a gray light. You don't see color in moonlight. It's an interesting fact. Test it for yourself. You'll see artificial lights like tail lights of a car, for example, still look red, but any unlit, unilluminated color image is black and white. And I think in this particular case here, in fact, I can analyze this image to say that would be it's just after a new moon, the crescent is on its way towards setting. I think the sun is actually set slightly up to the left of the screen there. If it is set at all, like you possibly would still see it. So the exposure of that particular shot had to be taken in such a way that you didn't quite still have the sun in the image. And that's why that side of the moon is actually lit at that particular time on that particular cycle of the moon, because the moon is constantly drifting around in its own sort of elliptical path. So it's not always aligning with the sun at all. It's quite a long way out. A lot of time, that's why we don't always get a lunar eclipse, solar eclipse, sorry, every new moon. So this is a few days after new moon, just after sunset. And I guarantee that had this image been taken higher up, that moon that we're seeing there would not be visible. That's my personal belief. I think once we get up above that certain layer, alternatively, it could still be visible because it is so low to the horizon at that time because of the distance. But if, say, it was several hours earlier and the moon is much higher in perspective, it would be invisible. You wouldn't see it from that height. You only see it from the ground looking up through our atmosphere. That's my opinion.
Take things that we already understand and try them and make them fit into their theory, because we...
Well, that's exactly what that's the whole point of it, isn't it? To make the observations and then make them match your theory. And if you can't make them match your theory, or maybe there's something wrong with your theory, but if they do match the theory, then it's entirely possible, and that's exactly how it works on our flat, stationary, planar Earth that we live upon.
We can test for it. We can see it. We can see the different colors of a sunset. When the sun's high in the sky, it doesn't carry the same color range as it does when it's setting, because it's going through far more of the atmosphere. And
exactly.
Some of those colors in the spectrum get cut out.
They don't get cut out. I think that's the wrong term. They cease occurring because they require more electrostimulation from the energy of the sun to cause them to fluoresce in the first place. So they're not actually cutting out, they're just ceasing to fluoresce gradually because the sun gets too far away to stimulate them. So yeah, it helps if you use the correct terminology, Tony, because then you won't look like such a bleeding idiot when you're trying to debunk something that you clearly do not understand.
So this is basically how he tries to, make it look like this is all part of his theory.
Well, yeah, but I wouldn't say my theory. I'm just saying the theory that, sure, I discovered it, but same as when Newton discovered or wrote down the laws of physics, he didn't make them up. They're not his theory. They were just his observation of reality as it's always been. The thing in motion remains in motion. The thing at rest remains at rest. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Well, in this case, the fluorescing of the atmosphere is a reaction to the action of the sun. And as the sun gets further and further away, the light dims until the point where Uluru here can now be seen, where it's in shade on that bottom image, but it was still in sunlight in the other two. But because the sunlight has passed through more and more atmosphere, because the angle of incidence, which happens when it's distant, creates a dimmer version of light hitting it. So that's exactly what you'd expect. And this is a good example, especially in that bottom image, we can see what they call the belt of Venus, where they'll say that dark bit there, that is the shadow of the Earth. Now that is clearly completely wrong, that you could call that the shadow of the Earth, that the belt of Venus is caused by it, because if you understand the heliocentric model, sorry, my nose is so itchy, I got badly burnt through the week. Where was I going? As the Earth is spinning in the heliocentric model, it is spinning at the equator at 1,040 miles per hour. So as far as Uluru in the very dead center of Australia is concerned, it's probably, I would say, at least 35 degrees south. I haven't looked it up, just off the top of my head. It would be approximately that. The Earth would still be spinning well above the speed of sound. So you see a clap of thunder, or you see a clap of lightning and you hear the thunder. I'll get it right eventually. You can sort of tell by the amount of seconds between seeing it and hearing it, how many kilometers away it probably was. So the speed of sound is extremely fast. It's lightning fast. In a matter of seconds, if the Earth was spinning that fast, faster than the speed of sound, then that entire shadow from the horizon racing across the sky would become instant. You wouldn't still see light behind Uluru here, as you currently do, where the sun is still, the sky is still lingering in twilight, because it would be rendered into instant darkness if all of Uluru is already in darkness. But as we can see, because Uluru is, that the convergence in the distance has now hidden the sun, but it hasn't hidden it from the rest of the sky. So the belt of Venus is simply the part of the atmosphere too low to the ground to still be electrostimulated for the noble gases to glow, yet the rest of the sky is still high enough that it's still getting enough energy to fluoresce, which is the whole reason why clouds will be reflecting that light, because they're even higher still than some of those noble gases. That's why they're lit on the bottom by these beautiful reds and oranges and pinks at twilight, even far in the east after sunset, which would be impossible on the spinning baseball model. People say it's the sun peeking through that tiniest little gap while it's going supersonic speeds, while the Earth is going supersonic speeds the other direction. That puts this long, lingering reddish glow on the bottoms of clouds. I mean, come on. If that's not a flat Earth proof, I don't know what is.
We'll go on. The rest of it's basically
the
same bullshit that they all say. The actual moon is about 70 miles high and 70 miles across. Okay, first of all, if it was 70 miles high, don't you think that every rocket that has ever been launched would at some point in time fly directly past the moon?
That still cracks me up every time I hear that. Why? The moon is like a tiny little dot, man. What? Every rocket ever should be lining perfectly with every viewer at some time to pass directly in front of the moon because it's close. I mean, how does that argument even make sense? This guy's there meant to be a PhD, I'm pretty sure, in physics, and he's a complete nutter. I mean, how often do you see a plane pass in front of the moon or something like these two images here? And let's just use that for a bit of a comparison. To me, that plane there flying in front of the moon seems to be reasonably well in focus. You can make out shadows on the body from one of those engines there, which means that it's taken at daytime, but they've obviously zoomed in that much that's made the sky appear black. So it's a very odd picture that to me makes both the plane and the moon look extremely near. So it's obviously taken with a great lot of zoom, since there's sunlight on the plane lighting it. The moon is obviously lit at the same angle because you can see where the terminator is. So it tells me many things. I don't think planes fly actually nearly as high as what we're told in the first place, and I don't think they go nearly as fast as we're told either, which is how they trick us with everything with great distances. When they say, they measure the speed and distance, say, between two places in the northern hemisphere, and then say these two places in the southern hemisphere, how come they take even less time? It's because maybe those planes actually do go a lot faster than the ones that we're told. I've seen them going what seems to be almost standing still at times. It's ridiculous how slow they sometimes seem. So when we say they're going nearly the speed of sound themselves, 500 to 600 miles an hour, I actually seriously question that at times. It'd be extremely hard to take a clear picture like that of one. Again, they put it down to distance, but I think that image shows both that the plane is quite close and that the moon is extremely close. You think about the way a camera focuses. Usually if you get one thing in focus, it's really far away. The things really close will be out of focus, and vice versa. You get a close thing in really good focus, the distant things will be out of focus. And yet here, the moon is in beautiful focus and the plane is in pretty darn good. It's a little bit fuzzy, but it's pretty darn good. So if the plane was 3 miles away and the moon is 12 miles away, that's what I'd expect to see.
If it's only 70 miles high, you'd be able to fly a weather balloon right next to it.
Well, no. Again, 70 miles, man. That's extremely, extremely high. A weather balloon will reach a maximum of about 24, maybe 25 miles. That's 130,000 feet. That's maximum that weather balloons can get to. Maybe NASA have some really big ones that can get slightly higher, but you have to remember it's a whole density thing, and the density of the balloon itself in such a low density environment, plus its payload, like your cameras and so forth, creating enough that it's only going to go so far. And if the balloon itself wasn't made out of something, a certain material that can expand, and I think some of them even have little valves on them now, so that as they expand to the point of bursting, they release some of the helium. Well, then again, that's going to prevent it getting any higher. It might stop it from bursting, but you're only going to reach so high. So even if we got 30 miles, it's still not even halfway to the moon. And again, a rocket, how's that going to thrust? On nothing. That's why every rocket we see, once it reaches about 25 miles, unless it's perfectly balanced, like there was a Go Fast one, which I believe did reach about 70 odd miles. But again, I question whether it's necessarily that high, but it was said to have reached about 73 miles before it went and stopped, suddenly hit something, and then fluttered back down. But most rockets are going to be slightly weighted to one side. So once they get up to where there's not enough atmosphere for them to steer through, for the fins and the thrusters to work, they just gently fall over, go in a big parabolic arc, what I like to call the Disney curve, and head back down to Earth every single time. So we simply can't go that high.
So this is what I don't understand. So they want you to believe, or he wants you to believe, or they want you to believe that the moon is only 70 miles above where you're standing right now.
Yeah, the moon, but the one we see and call the moon, I believe it's only 12 to 14 miles high in the atmosphere. So there's that.
Okay, so if that's the case, we should be able to get a better view of it.
We do.
It's only 70 miles away.
Yeah.
So when you've got,
as I said previously, photographers with the great Nikon P900s and P1000s trying to zoom in on something 20 miles in the distance on the ground are very disappointed with the results of what they get compared to looking directly at the moon 250,000 miles away, getting brilliant results. So yeah, saying it is 70 miles high or less, as I say, 12 to 14 miles high, that's what we get. We do. We zoom in on it with great clarity. We've got brilliant pictures of the moon. Can't see any flag either.
Something like the flat earther's camera of choice, the P900 or the P1000 Nikon.
See that, I went a bit too far, but see how he says, yeah, shouldn't it appear to get smaller? Well, to a degree it does, but as I already explained with the explanation I read out earlier, it's about the proportion of distance it's moved compared to the proportion of how much it's already far away. If it moves 50% of the distance away from you as it was, it will shrink a lot. But because it's 100% distance away now, let's say 90%, as it goes an extra percent till it's 100% of the distance away that you can see it, it's not going to change that much, a little percentage at a time, as opposed to something near, like your hand near, it's smaller, 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 or in this case, to the camera, bigger, bigger, bigger. It's all proportional. So once it's already 70 miles away, projecting down into 12 to 14 miles, by the time it reaches your horizon, which is only a few miles away, it's not going to appear to change in angular size to the viewer.
If you've got that camera at 70 miles, you should be able to make out a shit ton.
As we do. Look at that.
More
presents his
more
own
detail on the moon than what you
argument against himself. It's awesome.
If you've ever used one, or I'm sure you've probably seen videos where they've been used, you can pick up Venus, you can pick up Saturn, Jupiter. Those planets are a hell of a lot further away than the moon is, but there's no detail in it.
So we're told. Exactly. There's no detail in them. It's all fabricated in the studio or in the computer. It's all digitally enhanced. All of the images we get shown by NASA, whereas that's what we see because we're looking at it through a frosted glass firmament or ice firmament. What exactly they are, how they produce their lights, that's a whole nother story. But we'll talk about that.
Basically, little fuzzy balls, and that, you know, Jupiter, you can sometimes make out
Exactly.
the lines across the face of the planet, stuff like
As
that, with
you'd
the storms
expect.
and the clouds. But basically, it's a very, you know, it's a very blurry sort of image.
Very good.
And for most
We
telescopes,
agree.
it's exactly the same situation.
There you go.
You can't really make out any great detail because you have to go through the Earth's atmosphere to get a photo of it. If the moon was inside the Earth's atmosphere,
God, you're hard to hear.
which effectively that's what this tool's saying, is that it is inside the atmosphere because it's only 70 miles up.
Okay, so he said a few things there. First of all, look at that, taken with the Hubble Space Telescope. That must be the name for the fancy digital image enhancer, the Hubble Space Telescope image enhancer, because he just lamented how much they're all fuzzy images you can barely see. But now, of course, NASA to the rescue. This is what it really looks like, because we have the technology that you poor peasants can't afford. And I just have to listen to what he said again, because I've put myself off. Say that one more time, Tony, and speak up.
The Earth's atmosphere.
Inside the Earth's atmosphere. That's right. That's what he's saying. So no, again, I've already established that the atmosphere only reaches 12 to 14 miles high. That's the firmament B that you keep saying I just fabricated. No, I've observed it. That's what I've called it, because it never had a name previously. Some people call it the Kármán line, and yet other people say the Kármán line is 60 miles high, so it doesn't make sense. I believe that one they're talking about at 60 miles is probably the firmament. So that's why I need to call this one firmament B, out of the blue and into the black. So firmament B makes it, it's a perfectly good name for it. It's when pilots who get to that height, 12 to 14 miles high, they go to the edge of space because it goes black. There's not enough gases up there to fluoresce to give daylight. And that's what we call space. It's really inner space, all the way up to 70 miles, which is actually massive. I know when I say on the map to scale, it's like putting a sheet of contact and sticking it firmly to the surface of the map. That would be the scale size of the firmament. But in reality, 70 miles is freaking huge. Now, world's tallest building, half a mile high, and it's a massive building. Mount Everest, tallest mountain on Earth above sea level, is 5.4 miles. Aeroplanes fly 5 to 6 miles high most of the time. Helium balloons, 25 miles. That's really high. But the actual moon, if it is all the way up to the firmament, as I say, at 70 miles high, creating the plasma holographic projection down into firmament B, then it is not in our atmosphere. It's within our inner sphere, under the firmament area, but it's not in the atmosphere itself. But even though NASA now says it is in the atmosphere, it depends what you
Which effectively that's what
atmosphere.
This tool's saying.
Can you breathe it?
No. It is inside the atmosphere because it's only 70 miles up. And we know that the Earth's atmosphere extends far beyond 70.
Show this again. Here we go. So, yeah. So 70 miles is 100 kilometers. So again, I'm not sure if the mouse shows, but I'm using it anyway. So 100 kilometers would be about here, somewhere in the middle of the thermosphere where it shows the aurora. So the aurora, according to this, then must be bouncing off the firmament itself. And so even though this image says the exosphere extends out 700 kilometers, it's still nowhere near far enough for the moon in their model to be it, which is, I don't know, what, 238,000. It probably works out to be about 400,000 kilometers away in their model. So the moon, he's trying to say in my model, it's within the atmosphere. But yeah, I say our atmosphere doesn't go above 100 kilometers, and that's not even the atmosphere. The stratosphere area down here, where the hot air balloon, the helium balloon is sitting, the radiosonde, whatever that means, it's about 40, 45 kilometers high. That's it. That's the maximum that most of our things can go. Although they show a spacecraft going all the way up to the thermosphere, 1,500 degrees centigrade. Yeah, right. Not a hope in hell. So it just shows the fakery of things that they call spacecrafts and satellites. There's no way they'd get up that high, but they want to believe it, that's fine. As I've also been saying all along, as you can see in the gradient of color in this image, how it's light blue and then it gets darker and darker. You can use that also as a gradient of how I believe the pressure works. So the air pressure at the very bottom down here at 0 kilometers, where they've got the mountain and the clouds. So right down the very bottom, that's where we've got what we call 1 atmosphere of pressure, which is what, about 14.9 pounds per square inch. Don't ask me what that is in in kilograms or newtons, but it's 1 atmosphere of pressure. And so that's how we measure what a full atmosphere is. But what I'm saying is, when we use an altimeter that gets higher and higher, it's basically measuring the pressure to tell us how high we are. So if it's assuming if you go up 10 meters and the pressure's that little bit less, that's 10 meters, right? But the next 10 meters, the pressure is already low enough, but the thing that registers it is registering it as though it was still at 1 full atmosphere. So I'm saying by the time you're up to, say, when they say 30,000 feet in a plane, that the altimeter has actually gone down exponentially to say 30,000 feet, but it's probably only about 25,000 feet or something. So the way we measure pressure, it goes down incrementally, the way the color gets darker and darker in that particular chart that he's got there. It's given a false reading. So by the time you're, what we say, 50 kilometers high, we might actually only be 40 or even 35 kilometers high, but our pressure reading tells us that we're much higher because it's assuming a calibration down at a full 1 atmosphere. I think it just goes exponential in air, and the gases themselves getting less dense will also create that false reading, make you think you're much higher than you actually are. Again, that's my opinion, and I think it's worthwhile mentioning that opinion because I think there could be something to it.
70 miles. So why this guy's talking in miles, I don't know, considering we live in Australia and we have the metric system. But anyway, so 70 miles high and it's 70 miles across. Now, I don't know why he would say that when
hey, what a world, so
you can do the measurements yourself. There's various different ways of doing it. I'm not going to go into all of them now, but anyone that
how typical is that?
Knows anything about mathematics?
Hang on a second. Shush a second, Tony. How typical is that? There are many, many ways of doing it to prove the globe, but I'm not going to go into any of them myself. We're just going to assume it's all been done, it's all true, and it all works. So shut up and believe it, and we'll just move on and talk on the next little thing. Now here, when you look at this, you're going, anyone can measure the distance to the moon. For whatever reason, he's got a triangle going up in the middle of the sky that's going to nothing when the moon is way down there. Now, what is going on with that? I know. And the other thing when it comes to triangulating towards things which are a great distance away is that you need a physical standard by which you can measure it. So like when you're looking at a horizon, let's say you're up on a mountain, you can see a horizon 100 miles away. The last 50 miles of that will take up like this tiny centimeter of view. The next 40 kilometers will take up another centimeter of it, and then the nearest couple of miles will take up the majority of the view. That's the way diminution works. You're seeing more and more in less and less space, and that's why it all compacts. So when you're using some sort of normal standard triangulation and assuming each centimeter of the line represents an actual centimeter to do your calculations, then you're never going to get it right. So unless you've actually take a long piece of string all the way to the moon and then bring it back and start measuring it a foot at a time and count out how many feet or meters or kilometers, whatever you've got, you will never actually know the distance. So nobody can ever measure the distance to the moon. And this is one thing I will say I've asked globers all the frickin' time is tell me, how do we know the sun is 93 million miles away? Tell me the method you used to measure it and a method I can use to test it, and who was the person that measured it and how did they do it and what was their method, and give me some explanation for how we can do it. And everybody comes back with crickets. You never get told how they did it. They've just done it. Just be quiet and believe. It's all these globe idiots ever have.
Measure this themselves. So I don't know why he would say that, because it's too easy to be debunked.
It's too easy to be debunked. Yeah, right.
when
Aristarchus.
you
Here we go.
have somebody who is willing to make up terms like this firmament B and whatever else, when
What? So he's calling me an idiot for making up firmament B because we observe it in imagery, and I've just given it its a name. It's hardly like I'm making stuff up out of the thin blue sky. Actually, it is, isn't it? God, that's pretty funny. I just want to have another look at this Aristarchus method. There we go. How do they determine the distance to the moon? Aristarchus, 310 to 230 BC. Coin held at arm's length. 108/1. Why 108? There's a theta in there. It's been years and years since I've done maths. I don't know. Is it a theta or a sigma? Or God only knows. But distance to the moon, 108 times 1 over 3.5 equals 247,000 miles. Well, so you need a coin. That's a standard variable, isn't it? But what if your arm's an inch longer than somebody else's? It's great to do science and everything, but that really doesn't make much sense. Yeah, I could say it's the size of a coin and an arm's length distance away, and I'd be just as correct, according to the globe method.
When you have somebody who is willing to make up terms like this firmament B and whatever else, when they
hang on, I've got comments on my phone going here. I can see Nuovo Lovato. Sorry if I'm getting your name wrong, mate. Thanks for dropping by too, by the way. Using trig, it measures at about 10,000 kilometers. Sun and moon about 3,000 kilometers high, 1,200 miles. So that doesn't make much sense. Well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because this is part of what I believe the model is, and why I say we've got the firmament B, and I hate when people say firmament or firmament. It's firmament. It's got to be pronounced correctly. It drives me nuts. The firmament. So we've got firmament B at 12 to 14 miles high. That's our atmospheric gaseous layer. It acts as a filter through which we see everything else. So then there's virtually nothing all the way to about 70 miles high, as far as I'm concerned, 100 kilometers. And I'm open to correction if these are wrong, but it's from my years of looking into it, what I've come across. So if the sun was actually 3,000 miles high above the firmament, the solid barrier, frozen gas layer, then its great height down into that firmament to each viewer will appear in a completely different place as they're looking up through it to it. And the best example I use is imagine a fish in a lake, and the lake freezes over through the winter. So it can still swim around, but in the daytime when it looks up, it can see this hot spot apparition in the ice. And for all intents and purposes, to that fish, that bright hot spot in the ice is the sun. It gives all the light and heat that it might feel, if it gets any. And as it swims around, it seems to follow with it. And so what was previously in darkness, say 20 meters away, when it swims towards it, the sun moves with it and lights up that area as well, as far as the fish is concerned. So in a way, the water is a lot like our atmosphere. So when it looks dark to us, from somebody way over where that area actually is, as they're looking up, it could still be in their twilight, and they're still seeing some amount of light that we don't see. So for us, the sun is similar to the hotspot apparition that the fish sees in the ice. And so it's looking at it's not the sun at all. Well, he's looking at the sun, but he's seeing a false image of it in the ice. So when we're doing that through a 70-mile high firmament, if you're 1,000 miles away, you're looking through a completely different part of the firmament to see your version of the sun. So it's in a completely different spot. It's over there and your sun is over here. If you then assume that those two spots are the point of a triangle, and you've got a known distance at the bottom and you're triangulating to that, then you're actually triangulating to that, way up there, which will give you the appearance that the sun might be 93 million miles away, when it's actually not. It's only 70 miles away in appearance. But you don't know that because you can't know that. And in fact, it might be 3,000 miles even further. We just wouldn't have a clue because we can't know. We can't know what's beyond the firmament. It's just one of the great mysteries of life that we will never know, I don't think, ever. Like, not as humans. Maybe we might evolve on to become light beings if we're really good at humaning. But who would know? The stars might know, but they're quite happily seated in heaven, going around Polaris. So
Happy to make up those terms.
speak up.
What you're going to end up with is just him going over the same thing over and over again, and that's what he does in his comments. So,
well, yeah, because once I've developed the theory, I'm going to keep testing my theory until someone can prove it wrong or prove otherwise. So that's the whole point, isn't it? Once you know something to be something, you keep on testing it until someone can prove you wrong, and nobody ever has. Yeah, they can tell me it's making me sick. Ad nauseum, the meaning ad nauseum relates to something which has been said or done so frequently that it becomes sickening. And sometimes I actually feel that way about talking about this sort of stuff, because it'd just be great once it all becomes common knowledge. And the only way it can become common knowledge, I guess, is to keep on talking about it. Origin, how weird that it should be. Origins of the phrase within the Latin language, in which the phrase literally means to sickness. Well, yeah, that's what nausea means. If you're nauseous, you're feeling unwell. If you're adding to it, it means to. So yeah, of course, that's what it means. To sickness. But anyway,
I don't know whether he has.
I understand we're dealing with a guy over here.
Limited knowledge, or it's maybe it's just something that he honestly believes. I don't know. From the interactions that I've had, he does seem like a God botherer as well.
Seem like a God botherer as well. I really don't think that I've spent a great deal of time at all referring to the Bible for any of my beliefs. Like I definitely might refer to it sometimes for information. For example, when we use the Hebrew word rakia, which is allegedly what was translated into English as firmament or the expanse, generally that also translates as stretched out like a tarpaulin, like beaten metal or bronze, flat, and also as molten glass. And how do we make windows? Molten glass, and they settle flat. So for somebody who had never seen ice before, to me, all three of those descriptions fit perfectly to what a surface of a lake, for example, would exactly look like. So for the ancient Hebrews thousands of years ago to describe it like that, to me is exactly what I expect a layer of ice frozen atop our atmosphere, sitting on a cushion of hydrogen and helium. That would be exactly what it would look like. So that's about as God-bothery as I get when it comes to
he's saying
any of this stuff.
He's said all sorts. I mean, he recites the Lord's Prayer on his channel on one of his videos.
I did do a breakdown of it once because I think it's really good advice. But when you think about it, it's a globe mantra, because it's sun worship, isn't it? Our Father, which art in heaven, the giver of light and life, that is the hallowed one, the one who makes the halo. And even in this image he's got here, you can see the sun is virtually haloing the sun god, or the Son of God, with his 12 faithful apostles, the 12 houses of the zodiac. So for me to do a breakdown of that, I don't really see that as being very God-bothery either.
To God and what God has done in God's creation.
And it wasn't on the video, which he says he's addressing to either.
With the typical flat Earth theory that this is all heavenly and godly. And
well, the thing is, there's a huge percentage of the population who are actually religious, and since the world is our place where we exist, then it's pretty hard to separate the two, between religion and existence, because for some people that is an important part of their existence. So it seems to me pretty sensible then that a lot of the realm that we live upon would actually be mentioned in a lot of religious texts. But I don't think that the Bible is necessarily the greatest book ever. That that's the only thing we should appeal to, especially when it comes to scientific stuff. But it can have a lot of clues for what people used to think way back at the time when it was written. And it can be very useful, because some of those people, turns out, were really, really wise and possibly even advanced in knowledge, because they weren't contaminated by the sort of things that a lot of modern minds are also contaminated by. You know, they were living much closer to nature. They weren't constantly bombarded by electronic information and bullshit and light pollution and you name it, and noise. They were all much more deeply attuned to nature, which is what I try to do myself. Try to spend a lot more time in peace and quiet than I would in the hustle and bustle of a city, for example. And I think that's where you find wisdom, is in nature. And so a lot of these people then, because they were scholarly, they would write things down. That's how we got the records, and we got this compilation of books which became the Bible in the first place. It's because that at the time was their level of knowledge.
It's God's creation and blah, blah, blah. But it's not, you know, I mean, whether you believe in God or not makes no difference to me. I couldn't care less.
Well, same. That's another thing I agree in. But to me, it makes perfect sense if you have a greater understanding of what God might be. And I think a lot of people always talk about him or as a separate deity, whereas my understanding of God is it's within every living thing. Every living thing is a part of the consciousness of God. So there's nothing that is separate from God. So therefore, if you understand the world you live upon, you understand God even better, and you can realize it more within yourself. So, you know, if that makes me a God botherer, which, you know, I don't believe in the interventionist God, as they call it, for example, but you are the creator. You are the interventionist God. You have that within you, that through the power of your thought, you will create your reality. That's how it works. So technically, there is an interventionist God. We've got the Father God in heaven. We've got the Mother Earth, and we're the children in between. We are the light in action, in the flesh. We're the light walking around. So we, through our actions as the children of God, can create reality. So we are the intervention. It's on us. We've got to stop waiting for a savior. We're it.
But when you start using that as a crutch to try and prove something which is basically unprovable, then, you know, it always seems to come back to that thing, oh, you just got to have faith. Yeah, I don't have a lot of faith. I don't have a lot.
Well, yeah, believe in yourself, man. That's what you got to have. Yeah, you believe in your PhD doctorate. You think that makes you who you are. Well, those of us without those pieces of paper, we don't have to learn by a degree. We can learn by a whole. We can be one with nature, and it's all knowledge belongs to us, not just a degree.
A lot of faith in flat earthers, I can tell you that much. So he then goes on to try and explain how daylight works, I guess.
How daylight works, I guess. And why you put Pauline Hanson in there, I don't know. She's an Aussie politician. She became sort of infamous at one stage. She's a Queenslander. She had a fish and chip shop. She became really popular in a party called One Nation, because, you know, a lot of Aussies like to believe we could unite as one without having all these different parties and stuff. But she sort of sold herself short by having a bit of attack against the Asian population, because there's a lot of Asians that live in Australia, make up a huge part of our population. I personally think they're more than welcome. I love them. I'm engaged to one myself. Beautiful people. But because in some places they don't sort of assimilate as much, and a lot of them might just be tourists, we don't know, but you see them and they sort of speak their own language and all the rest, and a lot of people think that's a bit un-Australian, whereas technically, you know, we're not speaking Aboriginal, not speaking one of the 500 different languages that were here many years ago. We're speaking English, for crying out loud, so that's a little bit un-Australian in itself. So anyway, why he put her in here, I don't know, but we'll listen to what he's blabbing on about anyway.
The moon we see and call the moon is a projection.
Yeah.
Which appears identical from any angle of view.
Yeah.
That's also another way of them trying to explain questions that have been posed to them.
Yeah, well, that's right, Tony. I want to go back to that image too. That's exactly what I'm saying, because the moon and sun are virtually synchronous. Yeah, the moon is just 50 minutes slower, so the terminator line is incrementally changing to the point where you wouldn't even notice it over the period of a whole day, really. But the next day you will notice the change. Is that it's only going to be projecting the part which is currently facing the sun. So wherever it's projecting down to the people looking up at it through the atmosphere, they're going to see that exact phase. It doesn't matter where you're looking at it from, it's going to be the exact same amount of light projected. So it's always going to be the exact phase. And the only difference will be, and this image here obviously is just way out of scale again, because the firmament's not even the height of the tip of one of those little arrows, and therefore the moon itself is even lower again. But it's going to be done in the line of sight towards the viewer through all the various atmospheric layers. And so this, not only do they put the arrows again way up into outer space, for whatever reason, but you only see the moon for 12 hours of the day, and you only see the sun for 12 hours of the day, all on average. And so why you would even expect, like the Globers even are quite fond of asking this question: how come I can see the moon in the day but I can't see the sun at night? And it makes me just like, what are you? I can't believe you're even asking that, because the sun is how we set the standard of time. And when it's visible, it's day, and when it's not visible, it's night. So that's how you know the difference between night and day. So you're never ever going to see it at night. It just goes without saying. And the reason you see the moon in the daytime quite often is because that's on a completely different trajectory, and it's only actually one night of the month that is visible all night long, and that's when it's full. The rest of the time will always be visible in some amount of the daylight. So yeah, some Globers, they're not really good at adapting to new thoughts and a proper understanding of what we have actually been observing our entire lives.
A way of them trying to explain questions that have been posed to them about why the moon looks different. Another thing they seem to not understand is if you're in the northern hemisphere, the moon doesn't look the same as it does when you're in the southern hemisphere.
Oh, this one. Well, yeah, gee. It's almost like if you put a picture of the moon in your ceiling in the middle of the room, and you walked to one corner and looked at it and took a picture, and then you walked over to the other corner directly opposite you and looked back and took another picture, guess what? It's going to be inverted. So you could take that very same image, flatten it out, put it down the bottom, and have two people looking up from either side, and that's exactly what you're going to get. But bearing in mind also that you're also seeing the holographic plasma projection in a completely different spot as well, because you see it in line of sight directly to the moon. So you are seeing the same moon from the other side of the equator in a completely different part of the atmosphere, because it's always direct line of sight between viewer and creator of the light. So in a way, when they say the moon creates its own light, it does, but it's still creating it via direct solar energy hitting it, stimulating the atmospheric gases between us and the moon to give us our holographic plasma projection. It makes it look a lot nearer and a lot bigger than the actual moon. If you look at the high altitude balloon footage and see a speck of the moon from above the firmament B, it looks like a tiny little speck, like the size of a big star, for example. The sun becomes a big glary thing, what they call crowned in thorns, which is where the whole sun god is always crowned in thorns. It's where all that comes from. It goes way back into antiquity. In fact, one of the original names of that god was actually Thorn. Probably where the name Thor also comes from, but it was Thorn, crowned in thorns. That's what the sun looks like above there, because it's not filtered through all the atmosphere that we see it, which turns it into a perfectly round disc. And so when you happen to catch a glimpse, which you rarely do, above that layer, it looks much smaller because it's so much further away than the projection it creates that we see in the atmosphere when we're looking from down below.
It looks like it's upside down. And
Correct.
There's no way that a flat earther can explain that.
No,
The
no
same
way.
as the direction of cyclones and hurricanes. It depends on which hemisphere you're in as to which way they turn. Either.
Yes, I've actually made a video of that too, which you can also find on my playlist called Whiteboard Lessons. It's even titled Coriolis and Sundials, or it might be Sundials and Coriolis effect on the flat Earth. And it's easily explained by the path of the sun going around the equator is exactly like when a boat passes through water. It creates a wake, and the vortices on each side of the wake will spiral away in different directions. So that's all that's happening, is that the vortices in the atmosphere get started in different directions, and eventually some of them will hit the right conditions where they'll turn into a huge low pressure system and suck up heaps of moisture out of the oceans, because it's much warmer around the equator where the sun's path is naturally. So the ocean is naturally much warmer, and that's what will create the storms rotating in opposite directions either side of the equator. So it's a perfectly logical, explainable thing on the flat Earth, where the sun is driving all the energies around. On the globe, how does it make sense that we're spinning 1,000 miles an hour towards the east? How would that cause storms to spiral opposite directions either side of the tilted 23.4 degree tilted equator? How would it cause them to do that? I mean, and how are they both drifting at all the speeds of the spin? Because it's not just 1,000 miles an hour spinning, it's also 66,600 miles per hour orbiting the sun. And well, speed is relative, but the sun is also going 514,000 miles an hour through the galaxy. So the weather system is keeping up with the Earth, doing all those speeds, relative or not, because if they're just relative, how could they be real? So they must be existing. But those hurricane force winds might reach a maximum of 200 miles per hour, and when they hit land, they will destroy villages and forests and plantations and total destruction. And it's barely a fifth of the rate of motion that air is moving when it's perfectly still. Shouldn't we, every time we stick our hand out the window of our front door, we just get blasted by this perfectly still air? That just makes no fucking sense, man. The only way storms could work and all the air is circulating at supersonic, or yeah, it is supersonic. No, it's not. Supersonic is 767 miles an hour. These are going 200 miles an hour to be gale force, hugely destructive winds, even 175 miles an hour. It's enough to flatten villages, but it's still a fraction of the speed of perfectly calm air. It just simply cannot work on a spinning ball that we would have weather moving all those speeds, but then the really slow speed is super destructive. None of that makes any sense whatsoever. And if someone can explain that to me and make sense of it on the globe, my atmosphere moves with my spinning ball, and that makes it look perfectly still.
Clockwise or counterclockwise. Again, they don't have an answer for it. So I've heard Bob Knoll say, "Oh, that's just nonsense. That's not true," but it's a proven fact. I don't know why you would bother going to the point of arguing.
But it's a proven fact. Globers love to say that, don't they? We've done that. We've tested it. It matches our predictions. It's a proven fact. It's like, yeah, but you know, I think what's his name, Caleb, the other day when he was talking with for Earth, he mentioned something that, well, you could explain that it was monkeys doing it, and if the results fit the claim, then it's true that monkeys are doing it. So it doesn't prove that monkeys are doing it. You actually have to prove the monkeys. It's like, say, when they say the gravity does it, well, you have to prove the gravity. But gravity is so easily debunked. You take a kilogram lead ball, drop it, and the same size, exactly the same size rubber ball, drop them from a high bridge, they will hit the water at exactly the same time if released at the exact same time. However, when they hit the water, the rubber ball floats back up the surface and sits there. The lead ball goes a bit slower, but it still sinks all the way down to the bottom. So it proves it's the density of the medium resisting the thing that allows the thing to drop. And so in the medium of air, air has the same resistance because they're both ball-shaped. So that's why they fall at exactly the same rate. So nothing to do with weight or attraction of mass or attraction of weight. And you can prove it because obviously the water doesn't let the rubber ball keep sinking. It's because of the density, relative density of the ball to the water is the ball is less dense than the water, so it floats. The lead, more dense than water, sinks. However, you take the lead ball out and you beat it and roll it flat and shape it into a boat and it floats. Now you've got the exact same mass, you've got the exact same weight, so therefore you've got the exact same gravity. But you've changed its relative density to the water because its overall mass now is a larger surface area, and so the water can resist it. So it's relative density that causes buoyancy. So any sort of upward force is the buoyant force is a result of resistance, which is due to the relative density. And you can easily prove that this air container, it's because it's full of air is why it floats, by simply replacing the air with the more dense water. And then that boat will sink exactly like it did when it was still a lead ball. So it's all relative density and not gravity. So you can prove these things by testing it, retesting it, and then you've got a more concise formula. But when you say it's gravity due to attraction of mass, well, I've just proved that wrong because the boat has exactly the same mass, exactly the same weight, exactly the same attraction due to gravity as it did when it was still a little ball, and yet it floats. So there's no gravity required. There's no attraction of mass required. Just relative density explains it very well. So that's what Flat Earth is doing, is we're making more sensible explanations for things that the globe simply can't explain.
Something like this when it's there right in your face, that the proof is already there. But of course they just say, oh yeah, it's all NASA. NASA's just telling stories. Anyway, moving on. 12 to 14 miles high. I call that region firmament B. Again, it's his word salad because it's where the noble gases, yes, we've already gone over this.
Speak up.
In the presence of solar radiant energy, cease to glow any higher and it turns from blue to black.
Yep.
Right. So this is them explaining, attempting to explain why the higher you go into the Earth's atmosphere, the darker the ceiling gets. So,
well, that's right. That's exactly what our observations show. Why would I try and invent something that doesn't match what we see? I can't understand why you're having a go at me for explaining reality as it's observed. What's your problem?
As you look up, you're going to see the higher you go, it's going to get darker, 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 and eventually just go black when you hit space.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the other thing that they noticed too, is because of the lack of the atmosphere, things like the SR-71, when I think they only go like 80,000 feet, which again, that's why I get the figure for the 12 to 14 mile range. So I'm not sure if it's 80,000 or 90,000 feet or whatever. But that's because of the lack of atmosphere. A lot of these things, like a jet engine, for example, it requires heat displacement to stay cool. Another word for entropy. It's where heat is lost to the atmosphere because you need an atmosphere to dispel the heat, to carry it away, which is why a vacuum flask is such an effective insulator. Why, you got your vacuum flask to keep your soup warm or your coffee, whatever you carry in it, is because the vacuum does not allow heat transfer. And that's why the SR-71 becomes superheated and expands so much, which they have to allow for that in its construction design, which I guess they found out through trial and error, which is why at ground level, they can only refuel it just prior to going for a flight, because the amount of expansion once they got it means it leaks too much fuel. So once it expands at a certain height from the heat, it doesn't leak so much. It sounds to me like a pretty dangerous affair all around, but the point is, rocket technology, combustible fuels of any kind, would become extremely dangerous beyond the edge of space because there's nothing to transfer that heat, so the object itself would become so super hot, it'd end up cooking your astronauts inside of it, just like you would if you're in a tin foil wrapping inside an oven, like you would be if you're on the moon in daylight, because it's 200 degrees.
That's just their way of explaining it. Their ceiling is a glass dome, which again,
Glass
is
or
not
ice.
provable. If there's a glass dome over the Earth, where does it come down? Why?
Well, that's a fair question, and yeah, we don't really know. I don't believe it's a glass dome, as I say, for reasons explained previously, is that the height would have to be so massive because the Earth is huge. Now, it's 40,000 kilometers at the equator, which would make it, if it was an equal and opposite to the globe that's created, then it would make it at least 80,000 kilometers around towards the Antarctic ice wall. And to be a dome, then the top of it would be so super massively high, I don't think it'd be possible that it would support itself. However, it's a flat layer floating atop of hydrogen and helium, so like cushioned by it, and possibly because we know it gets colder and colder the higher up we go, that the very top layer might be hydrogen and might be an even lighter element that we don't know of down here on Earth, but it's anybody's guess because we can't get there and find out. But to me, it's a firm layer of ice sitting atop, and who knows what's above it? Could be water, could be ether, could be a different environment altogether, could be in a whole other dimension that's not even physical. You know, I couldn't really say, but it could be like water, a bit like on a higher vibrational frequency, a bit like, you know, water at its lowest vibrational frequency is ice, at its medium it's liquid, and then it gets higher and higher, becomes a gas. Well, maybe it's got higher and higher other states as well. That's why it could be still said to be separating waters above from waters below. I don't know, but it's always worth thinking about. But we can't claim to have all the answers to every damn thing.
Haven't we seen it? Why can't we see it now? Why can't I walk to some point near Antarctica and find this glass dome? Oh, that's right, because it doesn't exist.
Well, how do you know? Maybe that's what they did find. Maybe that's why Operation High Jump was a reconnaissance mission, as Admiral Byrd said on that infamous interview he did on the on that TV show. God, now I can't think. I really wanted to remember that word because it's someone's chronoscope. Chronoscope is actually another name for a watch, because Kronos, the god of time, also Satan, the Lord of the Rings, god of time. Chronos gives us the word chronology, and that's why it was someone's chronoscope. Anyway, he said it's a reconnaissance mission. And it's like, hang on a sec, so you mean you were down there last summer, and you lost something? And the rumor goes it was a drilling machine trying to drill through some sort of the wall made out of some mysterious blue ice. So, you know, it's interesting how that actually relates to the movie, the TV series Breaking Bad, because he even mentions the flat Earth into it, and he makes blue ice as well. So, yeah, I think that's a little bit of an Easter egg in that. So yeah, it's quite possible that there is an ice wall in Antarctica that they can't get through, that planes were mysteriously flying into and crashing and exploding, some invisible barrier. So to deny that it exists when you haven't even really researched it sort of says a lot about you. You know, you can go to Antarctica, nobody's doubting that, but top summer temperature of 0 degrees, freezing, that's the best you're going to get for a month or so of the year, and the rest of the time it's like can get down into the minus hundreds and stuff. It's like ridiculously cold. So to even contemplate going there, and for this reconnaissance mission, as I was saying, yeah, the rumor is there was an ice drilling machine that got stuck in the ice wall because the ice was self-repairing behind it, and that's what they were going there to try and reconnaissance. What's the word for that? Geez, try and reconcile. They were trying to regain, get it back. That's what I believe the purpose of Operation High Jump was all about, because they couldn't drill through it. So now they thought maybe they can jump over it. That's what they bought all the aeroplanes for. Still didn't make it. So they retreated, and that is when the Antarctic Treaty was created, after the failure of that mission, which makes me think they ran into something of even higher advanced technology that perhaps made a bit of a deal with them, saying, well, we'll let you survive if you go back and tell them this information and you make sure nobody ever tries to get past there again. So yeah, you can go to some research stations, you can play with the penguins, you can go on a few tourist trips, you can go to a ceremonial South Pole, but can you really go exploring? Nope, you cannot. So what's down in Antarctica or out in Antarctica is a huge mystery that nobody knows.
Then he goes on to say that basically once you get past that point, or a point just above that point, neither the moon nor any stars are visible. So
God, he's jumping all over the shop again. When we was talking about Antarctica, now we're talking about going up above firmament B, and no, that's right. Well, I've seen some high altitude balloon footage which shows some stars. It's not that clear how high they are, and I believe once you get above the atmosphere itself, even the stars become invisible. Otherwise, we would probably see them far more often. But it is possible that it's an exposure issue, that the camera isn't given long enough to adjust because of the earth glow and the sun glow, that the stars don't show. It's entirely possible. So, but yeah, I haven't watched a lot of high altitude balloon footage for a long time now, but back in the day, I've watched a heck of a lot of them, and that's what observations show. So
all I can guess is
make up anything else.
You know that the flat earthers like to say that space is fake and all the rest of it. And in the same breath, they'll use vision from the International Space Station and say that when you look out the window of the ISS, you can't see any stars. But
well, that is actually usually the case, again, because of the exposure issue. And to me, this just looks like a completely fabricated CGI image. I mean, again, because look at the glow on the edge of the horizon, which you would expect should be the atmosphere, although it's very stark. You don't really see any sort of twilight or anything. And then goes instantly, boom, into stars. Oh, that's definitely fake.
It's just not true. If the ISS is on the other side of the Earth, as in the side opposite to where the sun is, and that the Earth the ISS is in the Earth's shadow of the sun,
which it's clearly not.
If you were to look out away from the Earth, you would see millions of billions of stars, and you would see them probably in the most exquisite form you possibly could, because you don't have atmospheric distortion to look through.
Why you're even looking at the Earth at all in these images? You know, like they just have to put that there at the bottom of their paintings to make it look authentic. But you just said, talking about looking away from the Earth into the void of space. It's crazy.
See them. So if you think you go out on a clear night in an area that doesn't have much light pollution and look up, you'll see stars, you'll see satellites, you'll see meteorites coming in and burning up. You'll see all sorts of things that you won't normally see if it's light polluted. So if you go on to the ISS and you're looking at the sun being lit by the Earth being lit by the sun, then your eyes are going to meter and adjust for the brightness of the Earth, which is not going to allow you to see anything past it, i.e. stars or anything else. When you look out in broad daylight, do you see stars? No, you don't. Why don't you? Because it's too bright. And when you have the Earth hitting you in the face, the light from the Earth hitting you in the face, which is being reflected from the sun, that's what stops you seeing the thing. And this is their way of trying to explain why you can't see stars and whatever else.
Sorry about that. Probably bored all the viewers to
in
sleep.
broad daylight.
Oh, there's
You're
still
going to
one
see
left.
them when you go up in space.
Hello,
and you don't have
loyal
the
viewer.
brightness of the Earth right in your face. It's not brain surgery, but because I guess the biggest thing with any of these theories is, and not so much in
come on, spit it out, man, spit it out.
Flat Earth Aussie Jesus' case, because he doesn't even have 1,000 subs, and he's not.
Oh,
I don't think he's actively trying to make a living out of his.
Well, that's actually true. Thanks for bringing that up, Tony. I'm not actually actively trying to make a living out of this. Why would I? This is what I do for fun. This is my hobby, man. The pursuit of knowledge should not be the reason to be making a living, as far as I'm concerned. And to be honest, if my channel did reach to the point where it started to make money, which I don't even know how to do that, I do actually have more than 1,000 subs now, but that's neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned. Even if I did start to make money, I would guarantee you I'll donate 100% of it to charity. So I'm not doing this for money. So nobody can call me a grifter, for all the people that will have an attack of somebody who are doing what they love for a living, calling them grifters, because, yeah, that's not what I'm doing it for. So I don't even know why you're bringing that up as an argument, Tony. You're just trying to have a go at me, obviously.
His YouTube channel, I think he actually puts his videos up because he actually believes what he says, which is fine. I mean, everybody's entitled to believe what they want, but
I'm not a liar.
When you start telling people or other people that they're wrong and what they believe in is not true, yet they can bring your theories undone quite easily, like I have a million times with him, then basically what happens is here we are. That's why I'm making this video, because people like Jaren,
we should learn to do your sound.
Jaren's a really bad one for it. Jaren makes, from what I can tell, quite a comfortable living out of YouTube and his his podcast or some sort of radio station or whatever the hell it is.
And what's the problem with that, Tony? Are you jealous that people with different opinions from you are popular and people like them and they get a following and they can make a bit of a living from doing what they like to do? Is that a problem for you, Mr. PhD, Tony? Are you that disgruntled with your life that maybe being a university lecturer isn't all you ever dreamed it would be, and so you have to go and attack other people for doing what they like and making a living out of it? Does that make you feel better about your miserable existence? Does it? Good for you, mate.
Where he tells his listeners, his little sheepy listeners, that, oh yeah, we prove the ball Earth guys wrong again. The globe tards. We put this to them and they couldn't answer it. But every single time that they get into a debate, these guys just fold like a piece of paper.
What? That's not true at all. In fact, I would say I'm pretty confident that every single flat Earth debate I've ever seen, the flat Earth has always come out on top. We got far better arguments. We know your situation. We know your model. We know your beliefs. We know how ridiculous they are. We know how to prove them wrong. By proving the globe wrong, it sort of leaves us with the default position of what we see, which is flat and level water everywhere we go. We've never seen where the lack of curvature compensates. There's no evidence for it everywhere. We've basically stood our ground in every single debate, and I've never seen a glober actually win in the debate, apart from their ability to be more arrogant and speak over the speaker every single opportunity they get, to not even allow the flat earther to present their case or to give the rebuttal to the argument that's made. Everything they say is, we know, we've tested, it matches our predictions. Well, we can make the exact same predictions and get the exact same results. So making predictions doesn't prove your reason for saying that prediction works is the reason why it does work. We can find 100 different reasons to explain virtually everything that we observe, and it will still get the same results. It's the same with the old Eratosthenes experiment. And I'm sick of people saying Aristophanes. It's Eratosthenes. And yeah, if he set out to prove we have a nearby local sun on a flat Earth and we've got different angle shadows at one spot from another at the same time, well, that would prove we've got a local sun on a flat Earth. So it all depends on your preconceived bias of what you're setting out to prove. It doesn't mean the results being what you expect prove what your theory states in the first place. If you had a completely different theory and got the exact same results, you can't have two theories both being right. It's going to be one or the other. And that's what Flat Earth is doing, is analyzing whether your theory is the correct one compared to another theory that we've got, which says we have a nearby local sun, and that explains why we have time zones and different length shadows at different times in different places. So each are just as viable. It's just a matter of which is the most correct, and that's what I believe also Occam's razor is generally about, is the simpler explanation with the least number of assumptions is more often the correct one. And that's what Flat Earth is doing, saying, well, we see the sun moving. We've got no means of measuring motion of the Earth whatsoever, apart from very sensitive equipment which can measure earthquakes. So therefore, the least number of assumptions says the sun is moving above the stationary Earth. It's simple as that. That's why Flat Earth wins all the debates.
They've got nothing. They've got no argument. All they want to do is they want to sit there and just build straw man after straw man after straw man about how, oh, NASA did this and NASA did this. But we're not talking about NASA. We're talking about your theory and whether or not it actually stands up in reality, which of course it doesn't.
It just bloody knows.
These guys, I believe, they know very well that what they're saying is bullshit. I don't think they're like Aussie Jesus. I think Aussie Jesus genuinely.
Oh, that's a bit of a low blow, especially considering Bob Nodal did pass away. And to the best of my knowledge, it's got to be at least a good year ago now. So maybe he hadn't at the time. So still calling him, people making fun of the dead. I think that's well beneath the belt. No need for those sort of low blow punches. And again, I fully trusted him. Like it's one of the reasons that what's his name? That there's that South African guy, some flat Earth idiot. I think he calls himself Flatzoid. I used to watch his channel. He's not that bad of a guy, a bit annoying, but it was only about a week or two after Bob Nodal passed away when he turned around and said something, and he called him a shill. And I believe it was only a month or so prior to that Flatzoid was actually on the Globebusters, and he made a complete and utter fool of himself. He said a heap of shit that they just sort of like, no, you're wrong, and made a complete ass of himself. And I think that's why, to him personally, he believes that the Globebusters therefore must be shills because they don't always agree with him. Where, from what I saw on that particular show, I didn't agree with him either. But when he did that about Bob, while he was only just recently departed, to me, that's unsubscribed, and I haven't watched him since, and I got nothing good to say about the guy. I didn't really like him that much to begin with, but he's not a bad person. The people that still follow Flatzoid, by all means, go ahead and follow him. But he did call Bob Nodal a shill within 2 weeks of his death, and that's the reason why I personally don't want anything to do with the guy again. So to me, Bob was one of the greatest flat earthers who has existed. When I really got into it, I used to listen to their channel all the time, and usually I would find that just as I'm coming up with ideas to explain things, I'd listen to the Globebusters show, and bam, they're saying that exact same stuff. So it's like a time has come for this knowledge it's reached the 100th monkey effect, so to speak, that the time is right. Flat Earth is meant to be known. It was always meant to be known, and now we know it. And so he was one of the greatest ever. And Jaron is right up there. He's bloody really good. I don't think he's ever lying. He may do a little bit of grifting, but why not? Everybody's got to make a living somehow. And so if you can sell some products or merchandise to people who like your show and watch what you do and think what you're doing is great, then by all means, that's a brilliant thing to be doing. It's excellent. The modern age has arrived. We've got technology now to the point that a lot of the manual labor is being done automatically So we have to find other ways of making a living. That's a perfectly normal and right and respectful thing to be doing. So to be putting shit on somebody for making a living, for doing what they enjoy doing, just shows you're a piece of shit.
Genuinely believes in what he's talking about. The other guys, they make a living out of it, and they don't want to affect their income stream, which has probably been largely affected anyway because of what's happened with YouTube and Facebook and whatever else with the
exactly, yeah, because they don't like it, because the truth has become so popular that all the other things that people thought were more serious things, like scaring you and making false pandemics and that, they weren't people thinking about that all the time. But people say, no, fuck you if you're false news and your bullshit stuff. We're trying to find out about reality, and that's what flat earth is. It's a reality awakening to the world we live upon. What could be more important than knowing what we live upon? Because that tells us who we are if we know where we come from. If you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going. You've got to have this knowledge, and flat earth is the key to unlocking it all. It makes you see through all the bullshit. You think, hang on, so what else are they lying about? They're lying to us all the time about just about every last damn thing you could imagine. So if you're at the forefront of this human awakening and you're making a living while you're doing it, then hey, good luck to you.
The censorship of ridiculous content. With that happening,
exactly.
I don't know how much it's affected their income stream, but it would have definitely affected it somewhat. So,
actually, now that you mentioned it, I believe a lot of them can't monetize. Like Flat Earth Banjo, he's one of the greatest channels out there too. He can't even monetize his channel. Why not? He's making contact, making bloody hell, my mind's getting messed up now. He's making content, he's putting it out there, he's getting views. He can't monetize. That's, to me, extremely unfair. So yeah, that's where I got my map from Flat Earth Banjo. If you haven't subscribed to him, you should, because he's bloody awesome. He's put out that excellent book about the 16 emergency landings where planes, if they were flying according to globe coordinates, would be going way out of their way for the emergency landing. But then when you put it onto the azimuthal equidistant map and you put the straight line between A and B and you see where they made the emergency landing, it's really close to that straight line. So it makes sense. So he's proven it's a very accurate map. Great channel, and everyone should have one of those maps on their wall somewhere, I reckon, even if they put it up at work or whatever. Buy it through his channel. I've also got the coffee mug, the pear-shaped Tyson, Neil deGrasse Tyson one. I think that's bloody brilliant. So anything to support people for doing what they do. Like, I don't ask for any money at all. I did at one stage because I was doing it really bloody tough. But, you know, I'm back on my feet. I did a year living basically off-grid, 18 months. Did that really bloody tough, but it saved me a lot of money that I was just throwing away in rent. So now I'm renting another nice place again and I can afford it. Got a decent job, got in a work vehicle. They pay for all my fuel. So even though I'm driving and it's driving me nuts and it's making me tired all the time and I'm doing ridiculous hours, I'm doing okay. I'm doing well enough. So I no longer ask people for money. And as I say, if I started to make money, I would guarantee 100% of it would go to a charity. And I'll pick the charity. And the charity I pick is my partner. She's a beautiful, lovely woman from a large family in a poor country. And anything spare I've got, I'd gladly donate it to her. And if I had extra, I absolutely would. So that's the charity I choose, is a poor family in the Philippines. And if I'm getting burnt for that, well, so be it. It's money well spent. She's just the best.
As a result, they're going to get, they're going to do whatever they can to try and improve it. So they make all these fanciful claims, which again, they can't back up. And at the end of the day,
we can't back up. How is that a fanciful claim? It is sea level, not sea curve. I don't know why you keep putting up evidence to support our position there, Tony. Like, are you really a closet flat earther and this is your clandestine way of going around telling us that you actually well, I am a flat earther, but I can't tell anybody because I'm a PhD and people would disrespect me. But if I keep on showing flat earth evidence, then technically I'm still doing my little bit for the movement. Only got to talk like he
End
does.
up with the usual nonsense
Speak
that
up,
they
man,
come
can't
up
you?
with. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm not going to bore you any longer, but feel free to jump over. I'll leave the link to Flat Earth, or sorry, Iron Horse's things. You can go up.
Iru on Globebuster. Yeah, Iru's awesome. I really liked him too. Sea Lightning. It's a shame he's not on more often, but it's weird because you listen to the Americans, they're always complaining, oh, get this guy off with the broken English. I can't understand him. Did you see the latest documentary Vicar Dreviz eventually released, The Mechanical Realm? I tried watching it when they first released it. I just couldn't get into it somehow. But now that's out on YouTube. It's brilliant. And you read through the comments, and half the comments are idiots complaining, oh, you need to get somebody that can speak English to narrate it. Where I had no problem with. Sometimes Vicar himself is a little bit hard to understand. He's got a very strong, thick accent. But basically, accents to me are like sort of music to my ears. I love listening to a person with an accent for some reason. I think there's a term for that, like some sort of, if you're a bibliophile, I think means you like books, and there's a word like file, something. People that like accents, I must be one of those because I find it most pleasing to listen to. There's another reason why I like listening to Flat Earth Banjo. The way he talks, it's just very relaxing and melodic, and I greatly appreciate it. And so when I was listening to all the various accents throughout that new release, The Mechanical Realm, I listened to it in my car coming home from work because it's like a 2-hour drive. I only have reception for 2/3 of that drive, but while I had reception, I was able to listen to it, and I found it very pleasant and broke things up nicely. So when you see people even on Globebusters attacking Iru because of his accent, I just found him very, very enjoyable to listen to and very knowledgeable. Great to listen to. And to be honest, I'm a much bigger fan of virtually every accent except the American accent. It's one that sometimes certain people drive me up the wall listening to, especially that big old Yankee drawl and talking like this. Sometimes they're really strong. It's actually pleasant, but it's the in-between ones. And the ones that really get me is actually those English people like Fight the Flat Earth, and that there's another guy, another anti-flat earther, and it's not Simon, it's the guy with his dog. Can't think of his name either, but they have that strong sort of Americanization of the way they talk, and that one I hate. Like Fight the Flat Earth, I can barely stand listening to him. I only do because I can fight back. But some accents drive me nuts. So Iru, bloody brilliant. Globebusters are great, love them. Morgul, little difficult to listen to at times. He's got a very strong accent, but he's great. I liked a lot of his content. I think the Globebusters have done a lot of good for the Flat Earth movement. So, what was the other thing you said? Yeah, it leads to all their lives. Alaska Globe Killer too, eh? Yeah. I reckon one of my favorite. He's got 2 favorite videos actually that I refer to quite a lot, especially on Quora and stuff. Is when they talk about the Antarctic yacht race that I think they do once every 4 years. He's shown how various legs of the journey around the south, how they take weeks longer than they should if the distance is matched according to a globe. And the way he showed that, bloody brilliant. But the best one is the time zones one. I think he's done a re-release of it as well. So the time zones is a huge killer because, as you can see in the map there, the circles are much smaller in the center and they get bigger on the outside. And the time zones is a killer. Between Alaska and Russia, there's a 3-hour jump. So they've really only got 19 time zones in the far north. And then when you get to the equator, there's 24 time zones, exactly as you'd expect, because the sun, being the hour hand going around the equator, gives us our 24 equal divisions. But outside of the equator, there's something like 32 time zones of half-hour increments because of the vast distances between. Is you sort of expect extra time zones. In the US of A, there's 4 time zones from East Coast all the way to the West Coast. Yet in Australia, which is meant to be exactly the same distance apart, there's only 2. And they put a third one in the middle of half an hour for the Northern Territory in South Australia to try and make it look like we've got 3 time zones. So it's sort of like the United States, but there's technically only 2. And that's quite phenomenal. So the time zones video, highly, highly recommend. It's just have one last listen to PhDick Phony.
Go over and give him a few views and see what you think. Maybe drop a comment
you,
over
just
there and ask him to explain.
Such a lovely guy, this PhD.
How his theory works. Don't go over and be a dick to him. I don't outwardly try and be a dick towards the guy, but I do ask him questions.
But you can't help yourself, can you? That's the trouble with people like PhDick Tony. He's trying to pretend he's a somewhat nice guy, but if you ever actually listen to him on a debate, he's sort of always crying like a little bitch, if you know what I mean. He's just always whinging and whining, and while he's doing his own little video here, trying to make me look bad, is he still comes across as a whiny little bitch, to be honest. And fair enough, he said go to his channel and don't be a dick. So most people aren't. You know, on my channel, I find I get very few dickheads. I get the odd one in there commenting in the comments on some of my stuff, but they generally soon sort themselves out because I usually stand my ground and I usually respond to most of them, and I soon knock them back on their asses because I don't take shit. It's just how I roll, you know. Like, I will defend myself in the comments, and if I see somebody just being a complete and utter troll, that's the only time I ever do delete. Be a troll, get deleted. Don't be a troll. You can challenge me. Like, I love a challenge, you know, by all means. Question anything, question everything. I strongly recommend it. And prove me wrong wherever you can, as often as you can, because I also appreciate if someone can show me wrong. Like when people often make fun of me, I have to mention it because I suggested that the moon was created on Earth. Like you ask the Globers what is the actual theory for how the moon exists, and they'll tell you that a planet the size of Mars called Theia collided with the Earth and knocked off all these chunks. And those chunks became like an asteroid belt around the Earth, and then they all collided in together to make a perfectly circular moon. And that one moon creates 2 tides per day. Try to get them to explain tides. They can't explain tides either. But that's basically their theory for the moon. Whereas I say, personally, I think it was made here on Earth. And I think there was a time when there were giants. And I believe that giants have been here in the past. They've been previous tenants of the house, so to speak, as Mark Sargent would put it. And that they mined the raw ingredients and melted them down, and the moon is a hollow bauble. And that's what creates the craters on the moon's surface, was gases exploding from the inside as it rapidly cooled down. And so then by extrapolation, I thought, well, they had to make it from somewhere. What's the biggest open cut mine we've got on Earth? It's the Grand Canyon. So it's a potential place where they could have mined the raw materials, because I would think if it's not an open cut mine, then why aren't there multiple more examples of Grand Canyons on the Earth? They should be everywhere if it's caused by erosion. You know, there's plenty of places older than, I think, is it Colorado, wherever it is, that part of America, which is pretty close to the Californian coast. And a lot of the older maps actually show California as an island, a separate large piece of land. And what's it joined to the continent now with is the deadlands. So a lot of the smelted waste could well have been what filled up that gap. And Yellowstone National Park, being an underground volcanic vent, would be the perfect place to melt all this stuff into something and shoot it up into the air full of some sort of gas that would make it float. And then as it was rapidly cooling, as it rose, all these little explosions would be going off like fireworks all over it. And that's what gave us the craters of the moon, not big asteroid impacts. So that's my theory of how the moon came about. And I stand to be corrected if someone can prove it wrong. If someone's got a better theory, I think that's a better theory than an asteroid belt from a huge collision of a massive planet knocking it off the Earth and colliding into itself to create a perfectly circular moon, to me, it's a much better idea, because the only things that really nature makes perfectly circular are bubbles, or fruit that sort of grows equally. Seeds and things that grow uniformly can grow into something circular, but we don't see rocks. You rarely ever see circular rocks. Nearly all of pebbles you find washed up on the beach, they might be circular one way, but they're very flat. They're good skipping stones, that sort of thing. You don't find spherical things in nature very often at all, apart from things that grow that way, like a bubble being blown up from the inside. So that's why I think the moon, that's how it came about. So that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. So if somebody can prove it wrong or come up with a better theory, I'm open to hearing it too. But I think it's a pretty darn good one, and I stand behind it. So I get mocked all the time for it. Oh, giants mined the moon from the Grand Canyon and filled it with helium. That's pretty much all they can recite about it, but it's a pretty detailed process, and I think it's entirely possible. So we'll see if you got anything more to say. I'll wrap this up.
If you do it yourself, you'll find out that he doesn't really want to answer the questions. He just wants to have his have his view, and he just expects everybody else to believe it. So anyway, you have to challenge these people at some stage. Anyway,
absolutely.
Have a good one, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Oh, he loves me. He's such a lovely, pleasant fellow, isn't he? Now, how do you stop presenting, I wonder? God, if I know. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. I think that's interesting, sea lightning, that the firmament could be quartz crystal diamond surface. Yeah, I'm open to anything. I personally think that a frozen gas makes sense if it was going to be done naturally, but if it was manufactured artificially, and where I've been working recently, I've been taking a few still shots and stuff too. The mountains in that area, they're extraordinary, I think, for want of a better term. They're just like, I think in some places they call them buttes in the States. I think that's what they normally call them, but they just look like tree stumps, but they're massive, like really big, giant trees. There's heaps of them. I've documented one or two of them quite a lot in the past, but these things would have been massive trees, huge ones. They're, as I say, they're mountains. They're just like, they call it Devil's Tower or the Bear's Lodge in the States. They're similar sort of in appearance to that, where they've just got flat tops. And so we go harvesting trees, leaving stumps behind. When the giants came through, I reckon they harvested those trees. Back then, they must have been huge. There's even a couple of mountain ranges where you can see straight lines all around, and it's a decent sized, huge mountain. So, some of these trees might not have grown the same way that we imagine trees do today. They might have sort of actually grown in a big sort of hollow ring and still been the one tree. A lot of them do look like that, especially a lot of the waterfalls and stuff we've got, where water flows across a fairly flat bit at the top, and then the whole mountainside, 100 meters at least, is definitely interior portion of a tree trunk, but then the rest of it's all missing. So it doesn't, maybe so much of the exterior has just worn away and eroded over the years that it just looks like the side of a chopped piece of firewood, for example, but on a massive scale. Like I'm talking hexagonal columns. You couldn't wrap your arms around. They're huge. Big chunks of them still sort of hanging in the air at the side of the mountains. It's incredible sort of stuff. And that's what you mentioned next, the giants. Cool. Yeah. This should be live streaming. So once I stop this, it should be there permanently on my live videos. So yeah, I sometimes enjoy listening to it myself too, and there's nothing else to listen to sometimes when I'm driving. It's hard to find good content these days, to be honest. Like, I wish some of the bigger content providers would provide a bit more, just rants like this, talking with other people sometimes. I find often when you've got like a live chat sort of thing, like an after show, that you don't get a lot of value out of re-listening to them. Sometimes, it'd be just nice. And sometimes I think, oh, great, somebody's put out a new video, and then half of it is just text on the screen. Like I can't listen to that when I'm driving. So half the time I find, well, not half, but every now and then I find myself listening to my own streams just for want of anything better. No, I don't want to remove myself from stage. Or do I? I think we could be done. Oh, thanks heaps, Sea Lightning. You're great too, mate. I appreciate having somebody hang around. There wasn't many through the chat, but as I say, I actually did this because I just wanted to make the video as a response to PhD Phony, as I call him. Apparently he made that video a year ago and only just happened to stumble across it because he happened to start spamming my comments again just recently. And he said, God, what did he say? It was, oh, that's right. I asked him to explain the tides on the earth. And he says, oh, there's 2 tidal bulges. That's why we get 2. And I said, now I've answered you. You have to answer my question. I said, no, you haven't answered shit. You haven't answered jack shit, mate. You just told me what you think happens, but you haven't told me how or why at all. So I think you had to ask. The next one was, why don't we see shrinkage? Well, yes, I've answered that. In the sun and moon, I've answered that because proportional to the total distance traveled as opposed to the total distance they already were. So we see the most amount of distance diminution for near things, a far thing. And another example I often use for that, why not, since I've got a little bit more time to spare, is that when you go to horse races, which I've only done that once or twice, but if you do go to the horse races, it's a good example of how distance diminution works. So say you're seated at the front and center of the finishing post, so you're right across from the finishing post, and the horses start on the first straight, so they come out of a gate down the outside of the track that comes straight into the track. So as they come near to you, they'll appear to get bigger and bigger until they pass the finishing post. Then they get down to the next corner, they'll start to get that little bit smaller again in visual size. Then as they round the corner and go to the far end, they will get smaller again. So if you get out your binoculars and you watch them go from that corner to the next far corner, the whole distance across there, where they've gone a similar distance away from as they did on the front bit, they won't shrink in as much size between or get bigger again as they get back towards the center. They'll appear about the same all the way across the back straight. And then as they turn around the back corner again, that's when they'll start getting bigger again. So even though they've moved the same distance from the back corner to the other back corners they have from the front to the front, they will change a lot more in the front one in size because they're so much nearer to you. That's the way the diminution effect works. So when they're already sufficiently far enough away the entire time across the backtrack, you won't notice any change in size. That's how why the sun and moon don't appear to change size, because they're already on the back straight going from one side to the other. They might appear that tiny little bit bigger in the middle, and under forensic analysis, you can actually detect a slight little change, but it's not something the naked eye would notice. So anyway, thanks for listening to this one. I'm really disappointed that I didn't record it properly last night, because I was in a really jolly mood and said a lot more and added a lot more to it. But it was fun. Thanks for listening and hanging around, and I'll see you around. Have a good one. Oh no, that just removed that from stage. This might remove me from stage.